guys, in this video I wanted to show you my new mould. So this is the child mould and it comes with head, body, arms and legs, and I'm just going to use a few little tools to help me create it. Now I'm going to use Ceracino modelling paste within the moulds. A modelling paste is better than a fondant because fondant's a little bit too soft and you might struggle to get it out of the moulds. I'm going to use a little bit of powders. I'm going to use a petal dust, but you can use loose powders, and it's really just for a bit of blusher. So this is the mould. It's going to create a fairly basic looking figure. The mould has got little slits in the ends, and this is just to help you get the arms and legs out so you can bend it a little bit easier, but also you can insert a wire or a skewer if you want to as well. Now, the head is quite thin. The mould itself is quite thin near the nose, so just be careful you don't press on that bit too much. And then the body, again, has got one of those little slits in. So I'm going to mix a bit of brown and a bit of the pale sort of skin tone one together to get the colour that I want. I tend to find that this pale skin tone one is actually a very soft paste as well. So they're both modelling paste. The brown one is I find it nicer to use and it firms up a little bit more. So we're going to go half and half. So we're mixing the two together. Now you'll see when I've mixed it together, it's nice chewing gum consistency, but at first it's very hard. It's difficult to get it like that. It's quite crumbly. So you need to sort of warm it slightly with your hands or even 5 seconds in the microwave. Now with the mould itself, before we actually put the modelling paste in there, I want to give it a dusting with some corn flour. Now I would say use corn flour instead of icing sugar because it's less likely to dry out your modelling paste. And it's easier to brush off your modelling paste afterwards as well if there's any left on there. So really good brush in all of them, in all the pieces of the mould even. We're going to use 1.15 grams of paste in each arm. Now, it is the amount I use. If you want to change the amount, you can do, that's fine. But if you can get the amount as close to you can as what fits in the mould, that's better than having to cut it off afterwards. And can you see I've rolled the pieces into almost the shape of the mould just to help me get them in there. So they want to be long and thin to be able to push them into that arm shape. And the same kind of thing when we're doing the legs, but we're going to use 3 grams of paste in each leg. And I'm just rolling it so it's a bit thicker at one end, thinner at the other. And I'm going to try and push the thin end into the foot cavity and then the thicker end up towards the top of the leg. So give it a really good firm press in there. If your hands are very hot and you find the paste is getting a little bit sticky, a little bit soft, just give it a light dusting with corn flour. Just a light dusting, okay? We don't want to use too much. You can cut off a tiny bit of paste if you're very careful, guys. But you have to be really careful because you can cut into the mould itself, and I don't want you to ruin the mould when doing it. Now for the head, I'm going to use about 18 grams of paste, and you'll see when I push it in, it looks like it's not going in nicely at all. As long as it's smooth where the face part is, that's fine, but give it a really good push in place. So you can see even me using the balling tool there really to force it in, and that's to push it into where the nose and the mouth area is. And can you see on this one, I've left it rounded at the back of the head like this. So it sticks out more near the top of the head than near the bottom where the chin is. And for the body, I'm going to use between 9 and 10 grams, maybe about 9.5 grams of paste in here. Again, get a similar shape. So we're kind of going to go for a pear shape. We're going to pop it into the mould. Give it a really good push down. This one should be level with the mould rather than sticking out like the head one does. Leave it to firm up for 5 minutes, guys. So it doesn't want to completely set, but to firm up a little bit. Now, it's quite cold in my room where I am, so it firmed up itself after like 10-15 minutes. If not, you can put it in the fridge or freezer for 10 minutes. I'm going to insert a wooden cocktail stick just to help me. Now, you can use a wire if you want. If you find you can get them out without having to insert anything into the legs, absolutely fine. You don't have to do this, but for me, I found it easier. And then I bent the mould a little bit to pop it out. So you'll find there's a little bit of a sort of seam on the leg where it touches like the top of the mould. Just try and rub that down gently with your finger, or if you've got a modelling tool that you find easier to use, you can do it that way as well. Now, depending on how you're going to stand your figure is going to depend on if you want anything internally through these legs. So if you've got a seated figure, you're probably not going to want a stick going through there. But if we're going to stand it up, so this one I'm going to stand, I'm going to push my little cocktail sticks right through so they come out the bottom of the foot. And then we're going to remove the arms, same kind of way as I did with the legs. But you'll see when you're doing this, guys, if you are using fondant, the fondant is just so soft. And the body shapes they lose their shape as you try and pull them out the mould. The child and the baby mould that I've got is slightly easier to remove the pieces than the adult female body, where everything's a little bit smaller and thinner. So this is still one that's a little bit easier to use than that other one. So even with the body itself, you see it's quite flat at the back. So just give it a little rub, just with your fingers, just to round off that edge just a tiny bit. And then we're going to pop out the head. So I'm going to try and push a cocktail stick in. And it is important the head's quite firm, otherwise your stick will just tear out of the back. And you can see that it's left us with a rounded head where we left it sticking out the mould a bit. So I'm just trying to smooth that off a little bit. Now, if you're giving them hair and you haven't smoothed off this back bit, don't worry too much because the hair's going to cover it. And with the eyes, you can either colour the little round bits in with a pen, or you can paint them with black edible food colouring. Also, sometimes what I do is I tend to push a little black pearl or a little black piece of modelling paste in there. And those of you that have done my online basics modelling class will have seen me do this a few times in a couple of different ways. So if I push the hole in, I can pop a piece of black modelling paste in there. So I'm just going to do the same with the one that I had coloured in black, just so that I can make them match. And you'll notice on the baby mould video, I just colour them in black. So, have a play around. Go with the method that you find easiest or that you think looks best. And we're just going to give it a little bit of blusher. So I'm going to use my petal palette, but you can just use the loose dust. And we're going to go for a bit of pink on there, on the cheeks, tiny bit on the forehead. And I'm just going to take a tiny piece of black just to put inside the mouth. And of course, if you don't want to put black in, you can put white in. And I'll show you that a little bit later in the video as well. You can even add a little bit of pink to sort of the toes, knee area, elbow area. It depends on, if you're going to be covering these parts up, don't worry about dusting them. Now the moulds are unisex, so you can keep it as a boy or a girl. I think this one I want to make look a little bit girlier, and I'm going to put the eyelashes on. And I realise boys have eyelashes as well. And then let's just draw on the eyebrows. So I'm just using an edible pen for this, guys. You can use food colouring, or you can even stick them on in modelling paste if you want. I've swapped to a brown pen just to stick on some little freckles. And then let's give them a little white highlight in each eye. Again, I'm using the edible pen, but if you prefer, you can use edible food colouring in white, the powdered ones or the liquid ones. Or you could also put a tiny, tiny piece of white modelling paste in there, but it's difficult to get it small enough. So I find the pen's a bit easier. Okay, so let's stick our body together. You might have to just manoeuvre just the edges of the pieces that you're going to stick together a little bit so that they fit together nice and tightly. So I'm going to make sure the cocktail stick goes through both legs, and I'm going to push it into a piece of polystyrene to hold it up. You can remove it from the polystyrene once it's all set, and you can stick it into a cake. So I'm going to put them into the polystyrene, so there's a tiny bit of a gap, and you can play around. You can have the toes pointing inwards or outwards. For the top of the body, before I stick it onto the legs, I'm just going to give her a little leotard. I think maybe this one could be a gymnast. So we're just going to cover it in a thin layer of black modelling paste. So I want to keep it fairly thin because if it's really thick, it's just going to add a lot of extra bulk to the body. So I'm just trimming it till it fits. Just add a little bit of a line going across there. You can add more lines if you want seams and things. And of course, you don't have to do a leotard. There's many different outfits and things you can put on these. So I'm now pressing this onto the little cocktail sticks that were just sticking out of the top of each of those legs. I've put water between the body and the legs, or you can use edible glue, guys. Can you see? Now, as long as your paste hasn't dried too much, you can flex it a little bit so that you can push the hips to the same width as the legs. If you want to, you can leave it without. Then I'm going to push a little bit of a cocktail stick into the body. I don't want to press too far, otherwise it will come out the bottom. So I'm going to take a little bit off this to make it a bit shorter. I'm going to put the head on one end of it as well. And then that bit that's sticking out here is going to go into the body. Just make sure the length sticking out from below the head isn't longer than the body. Put a little bit of water between the head and the neck to stick it in place. And then let's put a little indentation in because I'm gonna bend the arm. You don't have to put the indentation in, but I always find it makes it a little bit easier for me. And depending on the position of the arms, you might even find you want to cut a little bit off at the top of the arm so the shoulder doesn't bulk out too much. So let's have one arm straight, and then this is the bent arm that's gonna go on. Again, just sticking it with a bit of water. If your pieces have started to dry, you might find the water doesn't hold very well, so swap to an edible glue. But there she is, all done. So you can give her hair if you want, or him, play around with hairstyles. Go for whatever you want on them, guys. And I do have an online video for different hairstyles. I don't know if that helps you all or not, but yeah, I do have a video available for that as well. So have a play around with hairstyles, guys. Completely changes what the figure looks like. Okay, so I've just put another one in a mold just so that I can show you to create a different position, because of course you don't have to have them standing up. If you want a more sturdy figure, a sitting down option is usually better. So we're going to do this one a leotard the same way as we did the other one. It balances better on top of a cake if you're going to be transporting or moving the cake somewhere. One that's standing can sometimes topple if you're not careful with it. So we're going to do it this way. So this time the legs can come out to the side. So because she's going to be gymnast, I think like maybe side splits. So we're going to stick her legs out wide, but of course you can push the legs together. You know, you don't have to have them like what I've put them. And then the arms are still going to go from the same places. So the legs still stuck on at the hips, the arms still stuck on at the shoulders, but bend them around to where you want them to come. So I've got her kind of leaning forward and her hands just touching the floor. Now with the face, I'll add the blusher the same as we did before, but this time I'm adding white in the mouth instead of black so that she's got some teeth. So instantly it looks really different to the one that had the black sort of in the mouth. The black just makes it look like it's hollow inside the mouth. And on this one, let's see what it looks like with closed eyes. So I'm going to use the pen to draw a little curve under the bottom of the circle and then some little eyelashes coming down towards the cheeks from that. Usually I go for an asleep look on things where I'm in a bit of a rush. It's always quicker for me to do them with closed eyes than with open eyes, but I think it looks nice anyway. And then if you want to add them ears, because the mold doesn't have ears on there, you're just going to add 2 small balls, 1 to each side of the head. Just make sure that they are eye height or slightly lower than the eye height, but not above the level of the eyes. And I'm just going to use a little rounded tool to push into the ears to make them a little bit more kind of cupped shaped. Now I'm still going to add a bit of a cocktail stick just to secure my head in place. If you don't add the cocktail stick, it's not the end of the world, but you're going to have it resting and setting for a lot longer and it's not as sturdy. So you can see her head sits nicely on there and it's gonna make it a lot firmer. And of course, again, you can play around with hairstyles completely on these. It just really transforms them and stops them all looking the same. So the clothes you put them on, the positions you put them in, and the hairstyles, they're just gonna completely change what that mold looks like when you're using it, guys. And remember, there is a hair tutorial that I do have available. If you want to check it out and have a look at it, please do. It is a paid for class, that one. It's not one of the free YouTube tutorials, but it is definitely worth having a look at if you're wanting to see different hairstyles and if it's something that you generally struggle with. So there we are. Now, I'll probably do another video in the future, guys, for the child molds and probably with some little boy ones. So the child one and the baby one, they're very similar to use. And also we've got the female figure as well. And then I've also got some heads. So we have some new male molds. We've got some female ones that are already out there. You guys will have probably already seen those. But this Gemma face mold goes with this body kit, guys. So the head doesn't come in that kit. The head comes in a separate box. So I hope you enjoy using this mold, guys. I'd love to see photos of what you create from it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment below. You can see more of my tutorials by clicking on the images on screen now. If you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button to stay up to date with my future tutorials. There are also links in the description box below where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and more.